Before you click away, take a second. Stories like this don't go viral because they're entertaining. They spread because someone out there needs to hear them. Somewhere right now, someone is being pressured to change who they are just to be loved. Someone is being made to feel like their body is the problem. Someone is staying silent because they think no one will believe them. When you watch a story like this all the way through, when you share it, when you talk about it, you make it harder for that silence to survive. Awareness saves people. Conversations protect people. And the more these stories are told, the fewer victims feel alone. She lay on the bed staring at the ceiling, unable to move without pain. The curtains were half drawn, letting in a thin strip of afternoon light that cut across the room like a blade. Her phone sat face down on the bedside table. No notifications. No missed calls. No messages asking if she was okay. The man who promised to stay wasn't there. He hadn't been there all morning. In fact, he hadn't been there since the night everything went wrong. She remembered his last words clearly. Not because they were dramatic, but because of how casual they sounded. As if he were talking about returning a jacket that didn't fit anymore. "I can't do this," he said. "This is too much." Then the door closed. And that was it. No yelling. No apology. No goodbye. Just absence. She shifted slightly and winced, her breath catching in her throat. The pain wasn't just physical. It sat deeper than that. Heavy. Crushing. The kind of pain that doesn't come from a wound but from a realization. She had changed her body for him. And when it cost her everything, he walked away. If you're watching this right now, stay with me, because this story isn't just about betrayal. It's about pressure. About love being turned into a condition. About how far someone can be pushed when they're told they're not enough. And if you want more stories like this, stories that expose the dark side of relationships people rarely talk about, subscribe to The Crime Lens and turn on notifications. These stories don't always make the news, but they happen more than you think. Now let me tell you how it all began. Before the hospital room. Before the silence. Before the abandonment. Before she ever thought her body was the problem. She wasn't broken when she met him. She was 27. Confident in a quiet way. The kind of woman who laughed easily, who didn't need to be the center of attention to feel seen. She worked long hours, paid her own bills, and believed love was supposed to feel safe. He came into her life like a promise. Charming. Attentive. The kind of man who made eye contact when you spoke and remembered small details. Your favorite food, the way you took your coffee, the stories you told once and never expected him to remember. At first he made her feel chosen. That's how it always starts. He told her she was beautiful. But slowly, subtly, the compliments changed. They became comparisons. Casual remarks disguised as jokes. "You'd look even better if, don't take this the wrong way, but I just like a certain look, that's all." He followed models online. Talked about bodies like they were upgrades. Preferences, he called them. As if attraction was a checklist and love depended on meeting every requirement. She laughed it off at first. Then she started noticing herself more. In mirrors. In reflections. In photos she used to like but now couldn't stop critiquing. She adjusted the way she dressed. The way she stood. The way she sat beside him. He never told her directly to change. He didn't have to. He made it clear what he admired. What caught his attention. What he considered desirable. And slowly, without realizing it, she started measuring herself against that image. Love became something she had to earn. The conversations changed. Arguments followed. Not explosive ones, quiet ones. The kind that end with long silences and unresolved tension. He'd pull away emotionally. She'd try harder. When she brought up how his comments made her feel, he brushed it off. "You're overthinking." "I'm just being honest." "You're too sensitive." Those words are dangerous. Because they make you doubt your instincts. Then came the suggestion. Not a demand. A possibility. He framed it as support. As encouragement. As empowerment. "If it's something you want," he said. "If it makes you feel confident." But the truth sat between the lines. "If you loved me enough, you would." She didn't decide overnight. She went back and forth for months. Fear. Doubt. Hope. The belief that maybe, just maybe, this would fix what felt broken between them. She told herself it wasn't just for him. But deep down she knew. She booked the procedure quietly. Told only a few people. He promised he'd be there. Promised he'd support her through recovery. Promised she wouldn't be alone. Those promises didn't survive the complications. What followed wasn't glamorous. It wasn't empowering. It was pain. Fear. Hospital lights. Long nights where sleep wouldn't come. Her body struggling to heal. And his patience disappeared. The messages slowed. His visits became shorter. His tone colder. Until one day he stopped coming altogether. That's when the crime truly began. Not the surgery. Not the pressure. But the abandonment. Because betrayal isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just someone walking away when you're at your most vulnerable. And this was only the beginning. If you had met him on the street, you would have liked him. That's the part people never understand at first. He wasn't loud. He wasn't aggressive. He didn't look like a villain. He smiled easily, dressed well without trying too hard, and knew exactly how to make people feel comfortable around him. Friends described him as driven. Family called him ambitious. Strangers thought he was polite, respectful, dependable. And in the beginning, so did she. He worked a steady job, talked about the future like it was already mapped out, and spoke with the confidence of someone who believed he knew where life was headed. He had opinions about everything: success, relationships, appearance, and he expressed them like facts, not preferences. That should have been the first warning. But when you're in love, confidence can feel like security. In the early days of their relationship, he was attentive in a way that felt rare. He checked in constantly, asked questions, remembered details, made her feel like she mattered in a world that often overlooked her. When they went out together, he kept a hand on her back, pulled out chairs, introduced her proudly. She thought she was safe with him. What she didn't realize was that safety to him meant control. It didn't happen all at once. It never does. It started with observations, casual comments, the kind you're not sure are meant to hurt. You ever think about switching up your look? You'd probably turn heads if you leaned into it more. I just noticed things, that's all. At first she shrugged it off. Everyone has preferences. Everyone notices things. It didn't feel malicious. Felt honest. But honesty, when used without care, can be a weapon. Slowly his attention shifted. Compliments became conditional. Praise came after effort. When she dressed a certain way, he noticed. When she didn't, he went quiet. When she asked what was wrong, he insisted nothing was. That silence was louder than any argument. He followed certain women online. Influencers, models, curated images of perfection. It never hid it. In fact, he talked about it openly, like transparency made it acceptable. It's just what I'm into, he'd say. It doesn't mean anything. But it meant something to her. Because love shouldn't make you feel like you're competing with strangers on a screen. When she tried to talk about how his comments made her feel, he flipped the script. Told her she was insecure. That she was projecting. That he was tired of walking on eggshells. He never raised his voice. He didn't need to. Instead, he pulled back emotionally. Became distant. Busy. Less affectionate. Less present. And every time that happened, she blamed herself. She thought if she just tried harder, things would go back to how they were. That's how manipulation works. It convinces you that the problem lives inside you. Friends noticed the change before she did. She became quieter. More self-conscious. Less spontaneous. She checked with him before making decisions she used to make freely. When someone asked if she was okay, she smiled and said yes. Because admitting otherwise would mean admitting something was wrong. He never demanded she change her body outright. That's what made it dangerous. Instead, he planted ideas. Talked about confidence. About self-investment. About how people who wanted more out of life weren't afraid to evolve. He framed it as growth. As empowerment. As choice. But every conversation circled back to the same conclusion. She wasn't enough as she was. When the idea of surgery finally surfaced, it didn't feel shocking. It felt inevitable. Like the final step in a process that had been unfolding for months. He didn't push. He encouraged. That distinction mattered to him. It allowed him to keep his hands clean. He promised he'd support her. That he'd be there every step of the way. That once this was done, everything would feel lighter. Easier. Better. She wanted to believe him. Because believing him meant believing the relationship could still be saved. What she didn't know was that his love had an expiration date, and it was tied to her appearance. When the procedure didn't go as planned, something in him shifted. He grew impatient. Uncomfortable. Detached. Hospitals made him uneasy. Her vulnerability made him restless. The reality of consequences didn't fit the fantasy he had in his head. He stopped asking how she felt. Started checking his phone more during visits. Found excuses to leave early. Pain, to him, was inconvenient. And when recovery took longer than expected, his tone changed. This isn't what I signed up for. I didn't think it would be like this. I need space. Space. That word echoed louder than anything else. Because space in that moment meant abandonment. He didn't see a wife fighting to heal. He saw a situation he didn't want to deal with. A reminder that bodies aren't projects. That love requires patience. That choices come with consequences. And he wanted out. What no one knew yet, what she wouldn't discover until later, was that he had already begun pulling away long before the complications. Emotionally detaching. Preparing an exit. Creating distance so the leaving wouldn't hurt him as much. To him, the marriage wasn't about partnership. It was about image. And once the image cracked, he was ready to walk. But the real shock, the part that would change everything, hadn't surfaced yet. Because the man she married wasn't just shallow. He was hiding something. And when the truth finally came out, it would make her realize that the betrayal ran far deeper than abandonment. This wasn't just about a body. It was about a man who never loved her, only what she represented. When he finally left, it wasn't dramatic. No shouting. No slammed doors. No final argument. He packed a bag, said he needed time to clear his head, and promised they would talk soon. He kissed her forehead like a habit he hadn't yet unlearned it, then walked out the door. That was the last time she saw him as her husband. At first she waited. She told herself this was temporary. That space didn't mean the end. That once things settled, once her body healed, once life slowed down, he would come back and they would fix this. Hope is powerful like that. It lies to you gently. Days passed. Then weeks. His calls stopped. His replies grew shorter. Then colder. Then non-existent. The silence forced her to confront a thought she had been avoiding. What if he wasn't coming back? It started with a practical question. One that changed everything. She needed access to an account they shared. A bill. A document. Something routine. She couldn't find the login, so she tried his email, the one he always used, the one she had seen 100 times. The password worked. That alone felt strange. If he was done with her, why hadn't he changed it? She told herself not to snoop. That it was wrong. That she was invading his privacy. But curiosity doesn't ask for permission when your life is falling apart. The inbox opened. At first, nothing jumped out. Work emails. Newsletters. Spam. Normal things. Almost boring. Then she noticed a folder. Not hidden. Not locked. Just ignored. She clicked it. And that's when the air in the room felt like it disappeared. Messages. Dozens of them. Conversations stretching back months. Some overlapping with her surgery recovery. Some dated before she ever agreed to the procedure. Different names. Different women. The tone was familiar in the worst way. The same compliments he used on her. The same jokes. The same promises about the future. You're exactly my type. I know what I want. I'm done settling. Settling. That word burned. She kept reading, hands shaking now, heart beating so hard it felt loud in her ears. One message thread stood out. Longer. More personal. More invested. This wasn't casual. This was emotional. He talked about how trapped he felt. How misunderstood he was. How his marriage was complicated. How he wished he had made different choices. At no point did he mention her pain. Or her surgery. Or her recovery. Instead, he painted himself as the victim. And the worst part? The timeline. Some of these messages were sent while she was still in bed, struggling to walk, relying on him for help. While she believed they were rebuilding something together. While she trusted him. She felt sick. But the story didn't stop there. She scrolled further. Travel confirmations. Reservations. Hotel bookings. Dates that lined up perfectly with the days he said he was working late, or out with friends. Cities he claimed he had never visited. He hadn't just emotionally checked out. He had physically left the marriage long before he told her. That night she didn't cry. Shock has a way of numbing you first. Instead, she sat there in silence, scrolling through evidence of a life she never knew existed. A version of him that smiled while lying, planned while pretending, and slept next to her while building exits behind her back. The man she married wasn't impulsive. He was calculated. The next discovery came by accident. A message popped up in real time. Not meant for her. Someone asking when they'd finally be together without complications. Without complications. She realized then that she had become an inconvenience in his story. A phase. A mistake. Something to be erased quietly. Her pain, her surgery, her complications, they weren't tragedies to him. They were excuses, justifications, reasons to leave without guilt. The deeper she dug, the more disturbing the pattern became. He wasn't just shallow. He was predatory in how he chose partners. Drawn to insecurity. To people he could mold. To women who would bend themselves to fit what he wanted. She wasn't the first. She just went further than the others. And that's when another realization hit her, one that made her chest tighten. What if the surgery hadn't been about love at all? What if it had been a test? A way to see how far she would go for him? The thought haunted her. Because if that was true, then the betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was psychological. She confronted him days later. Not in anger. Not screaming. She wanted to hear him explain it. At first he denied everything. Claimed the messages were taken out of context. That the travel meant nothing. That she was reading too much into it. But lies crumble when facts stack up. Eventually he stopped denying. Instead he blamed. Her recovery had been too much. Her emotions had been draining. He hadn't signed up for this version of marriage. That was the moment something inside her broke cleanly. Because love doesn't abandon you when things get hard. It doesn't disappear when bodies fail. It doesn't rewrite history to avoid accountability. She realized then that the man she missed never really existed. He was a performance. And the real him, the one revealed through messages, secrecy, and abandonment, was far colder than she ever imagined. But the story doesn't end with heartbreak. Because as painful as the discovery was, it led to something else. A decision. One that would change the direction of her life. The consequences of his actions would come back in a way he never expected, forcing him to face the damage he caused whether he was ready or not. Because some betrayals don't stay buried. They wait. And when they resurface, they destroy everything in their path. There's a moment after betrayal when sadness fades. Not because it hurts less, but because anger finally shows up. That moment came for her on a quiet evening, weeks after he left. She was sitting alone, phone in her hand, scrolling through old photos she hadn't yet brought herself to delete. Smiling faces, vacations, celebrations. A version of her life that now felt staged. That's when she noticed something new. A post. Tagged photos. His face. He looked happy, relaxed, unbothered. He was standing beside another woman, one of the names she recognized from the messages. His arm rested comfortably around her waist like it belonged there. The caption was casual. Laughing emojis. Inside jokes. No shame. No hesitation. As if she had never existed. That's when the sadness snapped. Something hard replaced it. Because betrayal hurts, but humiliation cuts deeper. She realized then that he wasn't just moving on. He was rewriting the story. Presenting himself as free. Untouched. Unburdened by the damage he left behind. And for the first time she stopped protecting him. She stopped worrying about his reputation. Stopped softening the truth. Stopped carrying his secrets. Because why should she? The breaking point didn't come with a scream. It came with clarity. She began telling her story. Not loudly. Not recklessly. Carefully. She spoke to friends first. Then family. She explained what had happened. What she had endured. How the pressure started small and grew quietly until it consumed her. The reactions shocked her. Not disbelief, recognition. One by one, people began connecting dots they'd ignored before. Comments he'd made. Jokes that landed wrong. The way he talked about women's bodies like accessories. Stories started surfacing. People remembered moments that suddenly felt darker in hindsight. And then something unexpected happened. Another woman reached out. Then another. Different backgrounds. Same pattern. The same charm. The same pressure. The same emotional withdrawal when they stopped fitting his ideal. He hadn't just hurt her. He had left a trail. That's when the narrative shifted. This wasn't just a marriage that failed. It was a man who built relationships on control and expectation, then discarded people when they no longer served his image. And the more the story spread, the harder it became for him to contain it. He tried to clean it up. He denied. Deflected. Downplayed. He painted her as unstable, emotional, bitter. That tactic almost worked. Because society is quick to doubt women who speak up, especially when they talk about harm that isn't visible. But the receipts existed. Messages, dates, overlaps, patterns. Truth has weight when it's backed by evidence. As more people learned what happened, the social fallout began. Friends distanced themselves. Invitations stopped. Whispers followed him into rooms. People looked at him differently, not with outrage but with caution. And that unsettled him more than anger ever could. Because he relied on admiration, control, image. Watching it crack was unbearable. Meanwhile she was changing too. Not physically. Internally. She stopped blaming herself for choices made under pressure. Stopped asking what she could have done differently to make him stay. She started asking a better question. Why was staying the goal? Recovery was slow, painful. Some days were heavy with regret, other days lighter with relief. But something new began growing, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Ownership. Her body was no longer a bargaining chip. Her worth no longer negotiable. Her story no longer silent. And that's when the final twist began to form. Because the consequences he faced socially were only the beginning. There were legal conversations, medical records, written communication, proof of coercion layered beneath preference. Nothing moved fast, but something moved. Pressure. Accountability doesn't always arrive with handcuffs. Sometimes it arrives as exposure. And that terrified him. He tried reaching out. Apologies that felt rushed. Regret that came too late. Words that sounded practiced instead of sincere. She didn't respond. Not because she wanted revenge, but because silence was the only thing he couldn't manipulate. And then one final revelation surfaced. One that would permanently define how this story ended. Something he never expected her to do. Something that ensured his version of events would never be the one remembered. People think closure comes with an apology. It doesn't. Closure comes when you stop waiting for someone else to understand your pain. For a long time after the truth came out, she thought justice would look dramatic. A public downfall. A moment where he finally admitted everything and felt the weight of what he'd done. That moment never came. Instead, consequences arrived quietly. They always do. At first, nothing seemed different on the surface. He still posted online. Still smiled in photos. Still pretended life was moving forward without a scratch. But beneath that image, things were unraveling. The whispers followed him. Not loud enough to confront. Not quiet enough to ignore. People stopped inviting him out. Conversations felt shorter. Trust evaporated. The charm that once worked so effortlessly began to fall flat. Because once people see the pattern, they can't unsee it. And the women who reached out to her? They kept talking. Comparing stories. Connecting timelines. What once felt isolated now looked disturbingly consistent. Pressure doesn't always explode. Sometimes it tightens. Slowly. He noticed it first in the smallest ways. A friend declining a call. A coworker keeping things strictly professional. A mutual acquaintance who no longer laughed at his jokes. Control slipped from his hands. And he hated that. He tried again to reach her. This time the messages were longer. More emotional. Filled with words like mistake, confusion, and growth. He said he was sorry for how things ended. Said he never meant for her to get hurt. But something was missing. Responsibility. Not once did he acknowledge the pressure. The manipulation. The way he made love conditional. He was still protecting himself. She read the messages once. Then archived them. No reply. Because healing doesn't require permission. While his world shrank, hers expanded. Slowly, unevenly, but honestly. Recovery was still hard. Some days were exhausting. There were moments she stared at her reflection and felt anger rise again, not at her body but at the reason she felt she had to change it. Therapy helped. So did time. She began speaking, not publicly at first but openly. About coercion. About subtle emotional control. About how love can turn dangerous when it comes with conditions attached. Women listened. Some cried. Some nodded. Some recognized themselves in her story. That's when she understood something important. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about patterns that go unchecked. Preferences that become pressure. Relationships that quietly strip people of autonomy. She stopped framing her story as a mistake. It wasn't. It was a lesson. And lessons don't exist to shame, they exist to warn. Eventually, the truth reached places he couldn't control. Workplaces. Social circles. People who mattered to him. People whose opinions he depended on. Nothing illegal happened. But accountability doesn't always need a courtroom. Sometimes it just needs daylight. His image cracked. Not destroyed, but permanently altered. People became careful around him. Women kept their distance. Conversations changed tone. He wasn't trusted the way he used to be. And for someone who thrived on admiration, that loss was devastating. Meanwhile, she rebuilt something real. Not her body. Her boundaries. She learned to spot red flags early. To trust discomfort. To walk away the first time love felt like a transaction. She stopped apologizing for existing as she was. And one day, without realizing when it happened, she stopped thinking about him entirely. That's the part people don't expect. The person who hurt you doesn't stay important forever. They shrink. Fade. Become a chapter instead of the whole book. Years later, someone asked her if she regretted it. The surgery. The relationship. The time she gave away. She thought about it carefully. Then she said no. Because regret implies wasted experience. And nothing she went through was wasted. It taught her how control disguises itself as love. How silence can be louder than violence. How people reveal themselves not in promises, but in moments of vulnerability. Most importantly, it taught her that no one should have to change their body to earn affection. Love that demands sacrifice of self isn't love. It's ownership. And ownership always comes with a cost. This story doesn't end with revenge. It ends with awareness. Because somewhere right now, someone is being told they'd be loved more if they changed something about themselves. Their body. Their voice. Their boundaries. And that person deserves to know how this path can end. Not with happiness, but with abandonment. If this story made you uncomfortable, good. Discomfort is where truth lives. And if it helped you see something more clearly, for yourself or someone you care about, then it mattered. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's a warning. And it's why telling it matters. If this video made you think, even for a moment, then supporting it isn't just helping a channel grow. It's helping the truth travel further than manipulation ever could. So if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, subscribe to The Crime Lens. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Every story here is told to expose, to warn, and to protect. And if you can, share this video. You never know who might need it, and you can comment where you're watching from in the comment section so we will know where our viewers are from. Thank you for watching. Stay aware. Stay safe.